Alright, time for another draft physics video presentation. Just making sure it's recording. Issues always. So I don't know where I'm going with this video. It will evolve into a commentary of some kind on the extent of the conversation and the quality of it, the mechanisms of it, all of that crap. I'll reference a Puro video that's just absolute mush. And just some other players, okay, in this game. And just the bullshit. It's just everywhere, and there's just no way to fix any of it because there's no rational conversation. I mean, none. No argument, counter argument is just lost. There's no. There's nothing. No one's on the subject. No one can stay on a subject. No point has any durability. It's just a mess. Anyway, so this is a video. This guy does some decent demos, physics demos. He's a real physicist, blah, blah, blah. But this video is completely irrational. I mean, it starts off with this silly, young double slit experiment kind of mush. Two-wave kind of theory. They're going to talk about the double slit experiment and mathematics to solve it, and they're only using the distance of the single impediment in the middle. The slit widths don't matter somehow. It's completely wrong. It gets completely wrong answers, which are just kind of funny. And it also has in it an element of, Stephen Bro caught me on, argument I've made. So I've said in the past, okay, that what matters is the distance between the sources. So the key to the experiment is the distance between the sources, and that completely controls what you get as an outcome. Now that's proven with the single slit experiment. You just do the single slit experiment and you move the two surfaces and you completely change the pattern in the sense that when the surfaces are close together, the pattern gets big, and when they're further apart, the pattern gets very small. Okay, you can almost see that, right? Yeah, lighting issues. My lamp broke. Let's see. Oh, I don't know if I like that for me personally, but it's probably good for you, so we'll do that. Stay. Just stay there. Okay. So it's the kind of thing where we all should be able to say, okay, that's the fact. That's how it basically functions. You move the point sources, which are the surfaces in the single slit, closer together. The diffraction increases. You get more separation, more spreading. They're less close. I mean, more likely too that the photons will actually be spread. That they won't go straight through. So the center here will get dimmer and dimmer as this gets bigger and bigger. And the opposite will happen as you go wider. The center one will get brighter and brighter because obviously photons are going straight through. And only the ones go by the surfaces are going to get affected. Now, this seems something we should argue. I mean, this is a premise, an axiom, establish a fact to start to even have a conversation about what's happening. This should be first settled. And I think any rational person should say, okay, that's pretty settled. That math does work. The distance between the surfaces does work in the single slit, and it works for a good reason. Blah, 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 blah. But the double slit is clearly, okay, you can't just do, okay, it's this distance. And then it's really lame when they draw it like this. Like these are the point sources they're using when, no, the D they're using is the distance between the surfaces. And they pretend that, oh, no, that's this. No, that isn't that. So they can do their two waves. I mean, it's so lame. It's so bad. Everybody should be saying, okay, that's garbage argument. Let's not start from that silly premise. All right, so even as I just drew this, right? This ends up being the same size as this, the opening, But there's two ways you can go with the experiment, right? You can have an opening and a very tiny, separation, impediment. Or you can have the other extreme, which is you have two incredibly small slits, okay, and a big opening and then a little tiny slit again, And So that's the trick. So I have been arguing that, instead of seeing this distance, okay, and this distance, what you should be seeing is this distance, okay, and then this distance. And I'm cheating here doing the impediment because I'm assuming the impediment's not a wire. But the fact is you can do it this way, and so that changes it. So, but it's really just about, well, I'm assuming that it's not something huge, and the slits are infinitesimally small, so that's my assumption. So the trick is this one, this distance just depends on which one's smaller. So if I make this thing bigger, the impediment, then this is the shortest distance. And if I make the impediment smaller, okay, right, then this is the shortest distance. And obviously the distance, you can logically intuit, is really important to how big the thing is going to be, the bars. And so obviously it would be whichever one is smaller is the one that that's going to be your shortcut to doing the math. And understand, it's just a shortcut. If you want to be make it less easy to see, you can just say that what you're really doing is comparing a vector, and you establish one of them as the point, your ground, and then you're just saying, I'm just going to combine it with these three other sources. And if I have 3 sources or 3 plus sources, let's say, I'm going to have a very bright, okay. If I have 3 plus very bright, yeah, that's what the V was for. And if I only have 2 sources, then I'm going to have a less bright, okay. And if I have just the one source, then I'm going to have an off, okay. And that fits with what, again, this thing produces as real images in the real world. All right, so we have some really good, this is a really good image. You can see exactly what it's doing. We have some indication of what, what went in, what the slit openings were versus the distance of the, the distances in here. So this will be a good one to work with, and so in the future I'll use this as a diagram and prove it mathematically. But there's no, the proof is already obvious. But anyway, what's indicated here is that you can do the experiment where you're changing, okay, this impediment, and it doesn't change that envelope size. So the envelope stays the same even though you're changing the size of this impediment. You go from this big, which is still twice as big as this opening, to this big, and you still have the same envelope size, because what's controlling the envelope is actually this distance and this distance, the short distance. And the little bars are being controlled by this distance, the largest distance between 2 surfaces. And obviously as you expand, keep the slit size the same, and expand the impediment, you're obviously going to be expanding the distance here. And so that's why the little bars do change. So you can change just the bars, or you can change just the envelope. I think you can change just the envelope. Yeah, you can change just the envelope by making this much smaller than this. So if you just start making the single impediment smaller than the slit openings, then you will change the interior and leave this outside the same. So, but that's all that's controlling it, is the smallest distance and the largest distance. So it's a subtle point, okay, a subtle point from me arguing that you just have to do this versus this, okay. The subtle change is sometimes this distance is shorter, and so you have to, modify the theory to fit the facts, the actual facts. So that's good to have, right? But instead of just reporting that as a fact, okay, or finding it as a fact. So here's a very good image of it. So I'm just saying, he switches between these two, the change in the middle impediment, leaving the slit size the same. And this just shows you the end result of you increasing the impediment, but you left the slit size the same. It's still smaller than the impediment. Then all you did was expand the outside surfaces. You didn't change the smallest distance, you just changed the largest distance. So when that happens, you get more bars. So it's like twice as many, actually. So it's a good comparison between the two experiments. So here we have experimental data. We can theorize on what it means and what it represents. Now, again, this video starts with just the almost insipid, okay, in the context description, like I said, showing the point sources as this center of the opening, even though the distance is really the distance between the surfaces. So he's drawing the vectors from the middle of the opening, even though his math explicitly isn't from the middle of the opening. He doesn't put that number, the distance between the middle, he doesn't put this number, this distance. That's not the distance he's putting in the math. This is the distance he's putting in the math. And the irony is, is that as his own demonstration proves quite conclusively, is that in the actual experiment, the only distances that matter is this distance between these two surfaces and this maximum distance. Those are the ones that are actually controlling. This one isn't controlling either one. So it has nothing to do with the pattern. It'll get wrong answers every time. It's wrong every time. Okay, it gets everything wrong. And, he's just giving everybody the math, a standard math with standard gibberish. And ironically, in the experiment he actually did, it's the distance that doesn't matter. It's the distance you can change all you want and it won't change anything. So that's the irony. And it doesn't have anything to do with either one of the pieces to the actual displayed pattern. The two patterns you're going to see won't be created by that. And so the very thing in his math is the very thing that has nothing to do with the actual double slit experiment. Of course, in his math, you can see the little picture there, the little orange bit, There's no evidence of the two patterns. He doesn't talk about the envelope versus the other pattern. So it has absolutely nothing to do with the actual experiment. I mean, it's just complete garbage. And the fact that people won't all admit, oh, this is really bad. I mean, this is really bad science, really bad physics, really bad explanation. It has really nothing to do with the facts or the truth or good evidence or being scientific. It's just terrible. It's like a doctor talking about, well, the knee bone is connected to the leg bone thingy, and somewhere around the foot is something, brain. Come on. It's so far from being credible as a theory, as something you're going to teach, especially. Just horrible, awful. The deception, the lies that are in it are just so egregious. Again, drawing it from here to here, and then doing math with this number. I mean, that's just such a lie. Come on. Quit cheating so aggressively to make this wave argument. And that's all it's for, is to make this, to give everybody an illusion that there's two waves and there's not two, there's four sources, all right, that are controlling the experiment. And it's just, that's fact. And it's proven by the outcomes, it's proven by what math works. And this shouldn't be debatable among reasonable people. But they don't have to ever respond to this video. I make this critique and they'll never respond to it. They'll never show me how it's actually right what he did. They'll never admit it was wrong. They'll never admit it's bad science. They'll never admit it's obviously got flaws in it. Nothing. They'll concede no point. And so there's no way to have a conversation because, again, you can't get to even these basic facts of what's controlling the experiment, ones that just can't be refuted. You move the surfaces, you change the pattern. Clearly, it's about surfaces. It's not about openings. It's about surfaces. All right, so there just won't be any conversation about the important fact that 90%, 95%, 99% of all the physicists, all the smart people talking about this experiment aren't talking about anything that's factual. They're telling a fable. Okay, it might as well have talking fish and flying pigs. It doesn't have anything to do with the truth. What's been experimentally demonstrated to be the truth. It's ignored. Okay. So just an example of just the horror I've been talking about. This is horrible physics. They won't concede that this is terrible. This is a foundational experiment for a whole bunch of theorizing about superposition and entanglement and all kinds of other bullshit. Many worlds, all kinds of bullshit come out of this. And this is the foundation. The foundation is complete deception, complete inaccuracies, grotesque inaccuracies. The two converging lines being an actual node when they can't be spreading, and they can't obviously make a big giant node because they're all happening inside of 1 millimeter. How can things inside of 1 millimeter spread to be 5 centimeters long? Oh, that's right, they can't, obviously. Just gross errors. No reasonable response to that accusation. Nothing. Nothing. All right. So this guy. So he says, "Can we move styrofoam with magnets?" So he's got a styrofoam ball in a bucket.
Magnets.
Okay. So he's doing a Ken Wheeler style experiment.
So there's
obviously you can see a metal hook right here, and it looks like he has the same metal hook in the styrofoam. So if it's made of any kind of copper in it, which it looks like brass, then obviously copper is going to react to the magnet. So, duh. Very powerful neodymium magnet, big, giant one. Okay, clearly could go the foot, even a foot of distance, but it's less than a foot. And obviously it can have an effect on the brass. So a simple flaw in the experiment. So, it just... it's so obvious, that we have to first make sure there's no metal inside this bucket, because we know that even aluminum, it doesn't matter, will create a complementary magnetic field, and it's small, but it's real, and it's going to oppose the magnet, and blah blah blah, and you're going to get movement in the styrofoam. Obviously, when this little tiny piece of metal gets moved, it's going to take the styrofoam with it. Duh. Alright, so I did comment. Looks like you're using a brass hook to attach to the styrofoam, question mark. If so, that likely what you're moving. No reply. Okay. Let's see if he does reply in some way or another. But it's we have the distinti guy. Okay, so he's still... There's no evidence that he's counted for my simple counter argument to his whole experiment, which is he's spinning he's created a device that's supposed to be picking up the eddy currents created inside of a copper disc, and what he hasn't eliminated from the experiment is the fact that he's spinning the magnets, which is causing an induced field, a magnetic field, in the disk, and that induced field in the disk is now inducing a field that you're running your magnets through. So the original magnets spun, they create a field in the copper disk, and then the copper disk just shoots its fields back to your wiring. That, yes, your wiring is moving with your magnets, but the field you're creating in the disk is creating a field that your wires aren't moving with. And that magnetic field is the one you're rotating your wires in. So you're rotating your wires in the magnetic field induced in the copper disk. Simple answer. No paradox here. But there can't be an interaction of any kind with these people. They're completely closed to having any of these critiques or any of the conversation about any of these fundamental principles. He wants to prove ether. And it's his agenda, and it comes down to he says he now has good reason to logically think because of this bullshit, and it's so bullshit because he uses an Einstein quote that's a complete deception in here, which is just this is more part of the rag, part of the bullshit is to just pretend the history is completely different than it actually is. I don't know why this doesn't work. Alright, so he doesn't have the Einstein quote there. Maybe it's here. Nope. Maybe it's back here. Nope. Maybe it's back here. So far not. Yeah, so... Oh, and this whole paradigm shift crap. Oh, it's just disgusting. Let's see. Earth-centric. Okay, so he goes into all this wasted time bullshit about telling us about, the history of the change in the model of, the orbits of the bodies in space, and we all know that story. You don't need that one over and over and over again. Yeah, lots of wrong assumptions, but really there wasn't much evidence, and so the more evidence, the more it became obvious, blah blah blah. So he argues that Einstein, he put an Einstein quote in here where Einstein was really just saying exactly the opposite, and he just takes the first part of Einstein's statement and he doesn't play the second part of his statement, which no doubt was, it was supposed that the magnetic field was static. Einstein clearly knew it wasn't static. He clearly knew gravity moved at a speed, so he knew none of these fields were static. They were actually moving through space at a speed, the speed of force, which he didn't say, but obviously that's the speed it was moving at. So it's obviously being emanating from it, but the real point is how I've argued, is reflections account for that. That all it's doing is reflecting the world that goes in, because obviously none of these things, they're in the universe like everything else, and they're not getting bigger, so they're not absorbing the energy that actually hits them. They have to re-admit it, and they're just re-admitting it in another form. The sun doesn't get heavier. The earth doesn't get heavier because the sunlight hits it. It obviously has to reflect all of that energy eventually. Okay, it's just a fact. Or it would have to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so everything's just reflecting the field that we're all in, and the field is not ether. Okay, it's not some glue or goop or jello or whatever people imagine it to be. It's just bits of momentum, BBs. We're in a universe full of little bits of momentum flying around, BBs. And we're just big objects in that little, that field of little bits of momentum. But anyway, so I'm just saying, there's another character is just you can't really have a conversation with. He's not interested in the conversation. He's not interested in being shown wrong, or having his premises knocked down, responding to anything. So another futile effort there. And then the Puro talking, so still using Hathaway as an example, where that was an example of his failure to be civil and reasonable in terms of recognizing that his expectations of what a conversation are so distant, so Chinese, that anyone should be objecting because they don't know that they're just being used as some sort of dissecting frog. They think they're in it for a cause, which is the truth, and Puro is playing some game where the truth isn't what he's after. He's just after reactions. He's just being a troll, frankly. That's the bottom line. He's trying to trigger. He's not trying to establish a chain of reasoning or logic to prove a case. He's not being a good lawyer. He's being a shyster, plainly. We don't need evidence. We just need to look at the guy and, let's just suppose, he smokes cigarettes. He's got to be guilty of something, right? It's only a criminal would do that. It's just bullshit. His whole interaction with Hathaway was such bullshit. Anyway, and to use this as some sort of argument. So, yes, Hathaway said to help a brother out in the context of if you're supposed to be doing this for some humanitarian reason and you're not in it for the argument, the whole point would be is that if you know the truth, you should help a brother out and let them know what the truth is. You shouldn't be playing some game with the truth, dangling it around in little, here's a glimmer of it. Here, it's just shot by. What's your triggered reaction to some little tiny portion of it? Let me give you one little piece of evidence and see if you can understand it. Some sort of bullshit game. Just get to it. If you got the argument, provide the argument. Instead of playing all these fucking games. Anyway. Alright, so I'll think about what other part of this I want to get to. I don't know whether it's worth it, just because it's not really have anything to do with. Just has to do with the whole frickin' society and its degrade. So there's two things he talks about: monetization, as if it's all harmless, like you put a commercial on your video and it's just about whether you get some revenue. No, it's really about you're going to waste your viewers' time, so their time is going to get consumed. That's real money for some people. Time is money. They have to waste time waiting for a commercial. It's just a waste. And then we're talking about, well, do we really want to finance anything in our society through this stupid mechanism where we all pay for it? Okay, if everybody who is going to sell a product has to get into some competition, like who has the biggest megaphone, and so we have to donate money, to Coca-Cola, so it can put more batteries in its megaphone and shout louder than Pepsi. So we're paying for all of it. A huge amount of money, a whole bunch of human resources, labor is being wasted. Instead of building Hoover dams, people are wasting their time trying to figure out how to manipulate you. Which way, if I put little zigzags in the letter C on the Coke can, if I make it zigzaggy, there's a statistical fact that this will trigger more people to buy the fucking idiotic product. That kind of horse shit. How to manipulate you. There's a whole bunch of people whose job it is to look over statistics and figure out how to manipulate you so they can create some 15-second ad that will provoke you to go to the store and buy this crap. That's the evil of monetization. If monetization was just, oh yeah, I just took some of your money. Okay, it's like you paid into YouTube $30 a month or something, and I get to take some of your money that you put in to watch. Some kind of bullshit like that. All right? Well, at least that's more honest. You're paying for content you like. Okay? There's no bunch of employees involved. There's not a whole infrastructure you're financing. A whole evil infrastructure that isn't going to get you the best product. It's going to get you the biggest crook. The shysters are going to win. The honest man isn't going to win in that competition. The game player, the guy figuring out that zigzagging the letter on the Coke, works. That's the shyster who's going to get rewarded. So that's the evil of monetization. It's evil that you're wasting people's time by forcing some other agenda on them. Okay, let's change the subject to product selling. That sucks. Okay, so if we all don't have to do that, great. But again, the real evil is the social evil of using this make everybody pay for it because you want to watch it. Because the product I want to buy, he has to sit there and distribute this very inefficient advertising to all these people who don't care. He has to put ads in papers where 3 people read it or some other thing. It's so inefficient. The amount of money it's wasted. It just makes Google richer. It's just disgusting. How inefficient it is as a way of financing video production. It's horribly inefficient. We're paying way too much for way too little quality, and for it just to become, shysters selling, shysters promoting shysters, manipulators, people who use all of the tactics. Let me change my icon so it's more attractive and it's more triggering. All the games being played, fake news all over the place, fake everything. It just sucks. And you're buying into all of that when you have this silly conversation about how monetization is benign and I want to have a retirement income. Well, if you're doing it this way, it's still unethical as hell, in my opinion. You're still not doing society any good. So find some other way to monetize, rather than buying into the whole fucking idiotic notion that commercials are a good idea, because they're a horrible idea. Okay. Yeah, it's enough on that. And so the other thing was his whole description of what's degraded the conversation is, he thinks the video reply button was somehow essential to the function of YouTube. And again, he's never responded to this argument. I've made this argument for years that had nothing to do with any of it. You could still reply to a video. You just post a comment that says, here's a video response. Worked just fine. There's no problem. And clearly, in most cases, when you reply to somebody, it wasn't the fact that there was a category called video replies that made your video visible. It was that videos were related based on what was in the title, and people could look at videos that way, and they could search and find them based on videos in a category. And all of that is what destroyed the other sourcing of new viewers. You can't get new viewers if there's no algorithm to connect anything, and there's no algorithm connecting anything anymore. YouTube has made it harder and harder to find similar content or related content. Their focus is to always promote their content, the content they make the most money off of. And that's the content that's going to show up in this featured list and all that crap primarily. And it'll have tiny reference to maybe to some sort of idea of something being on the same subject. But again, there is no categorization. You can't look in the philosophy category or this category or that. All that was destroyed. All of the metadata that made any sense. And the same thing happened on the internet. They had a simple tag where you put keywords in, a meta tag. And the idea was is people honestly describe their content, and we have some sort of honest way of categorizing content, because it would all be obligate English. You know, this is, you can't even search on YouTube for videos based on what language they're goddamn in. I mean, it's impossible to do any real searching for physics videos anymore, because most of the new videos being produced are produced in Hindi. So what good does it do? You have to go through hundreds of Hindi videos before you get one in English. I mean, it's pointless. I mean, it's completely broken as a search mechanism. It's useless. It's because it's so time-consuming and irritating. But anyway, so although I would have kept, you know, if I was running YouTube, I certainly wouldn't have gotten rid of the related videos or our response video category. The fact was, people were just abusing it. Popular people make a video, they would put their video in the video response, even though it had not a damn thing to do with responding to what was being said or done in the video. So it just became a place for people to throw their video to give eyeballs, and that was it. So it was being overtly abused, and YouTube didn't want to spend the money to monitor any of that. It doesn't want to control any of this stuff, because that takes employees. You know, people lie about you. You don't have any court you can go to. You can't go to some YouTube editor and say, you know, this is obviously somebody trolling and being, you know, illegally malicious in their activities. Why don't you just tell him he can't do that? But YouTube would have to hire employees to do that. They'd have to pay somebody, and that would cut into their huge, giant profits. So that isn't going to happen. They're not going to take responsibility for the medium they've created. They're not going to clean up the messes it makes. You know, they're not going to clean up the poo that this dog, you know, creates. Any of the liabilities, they try to sweep them under the rug and get away from them and cop out. So they took the DMCA, which was a law that gave them immunity from prosecution for the evil crap that people would do. And they changed the rules entirely and just pre-censor for, if you steal Sony's content, I mean you use it, you're automatically guilty and have to prove you're innocent. But if it's vice versa, okay, somebody with no visibility, it's the other way around. I have to prove they abused it. I have to prove, you know, my copyright. So, you know, it's double standards everywhere. The whole thing is made and engineered to preserve the status quo, the whole popularity bullshit engine. The famous will remain famous, and there just won't be any mechanism to create any real good competition to make anything called the best rise to the top. That's not going to happen. And so there's no conversation. But there's no conversation with Puro, ironically, because Puro can never make a response video that's actually on the subject of the video. He doesn't even play videos now, you know, other people's videos. It's a rarity that he actually plays some of the content out of some portion of somebody else's video, where it was commonplace in the past to play somebody's video, just play it and respond to it. He doesn't do that anymore. So he's the one who changed the game, not YouTube, because his game isn't honest anymore, and it never really was. But he's not tackling the argument. He's trying to pigeonhole the argument and try to convert the argument into some other argument. And again, you could see that with Hoffladay, where they couldn't even agree on the terms of a debate, let alone actually have a debate. So they never could have the debate because they had to argue about what a debate was, and whether the debate should be you just keep changing the subject or whether you actually have to stay on the subject. What are we debating? The existence of God or abortion. They're two different subjects, obviously. And so if the argument's always going to be that I can argue that fetuses are magical and have spirits, well, then if that's where it's always going to end, and you're never going to have an argument about actual biology and what the actual thing is capable of, and especially in the context of a world where all the other fetuses are completely irrelevant. Somehow the human is a magical fetus, and all the other fetuses, nobody sheds a tear for any of those poor fetuses, which is just such bullshit. And it just makes it so obvious, the evasion of the real subject. So anyway, I've made a ton of arguments in these videos explaining how their evidence absolutely sucks, the history of their science sucks, the logic sucks, every element of their theory sucks. It has real gaping, gigantic holes in it, and they've responded to none of those arguments. None at all. And all they do is play with word games where, because I said it was the center impediment instead of saying it's the smallest distance, that distinction, they've proven me the whole theory wrong somehow, when obviously they haven't done any such thing. So, it's just such bullshit. So there's really no interaction because I can't get somebody else to make a video where they respond to anything I'm saying. All I can get them to do is make some video where they, spin me around in circles or play 13 seconds of what I'm saying. Quote mine the hell out of me, go back 5 years, all that kind of horse shit. But nothing relevant, nothing useful, nothing to do anything to, create any kind of solid structure based on, let's accept some basic facts and agree on those facts and then say, what do those facts mean? And the fact is kinetic energy, they got no evidence. They can't send me to some location to see the perfect piece of evidence that just proves the existence of this kinetic energy thing. They don't have the experiment. And not having evidence is evidence. So that's another thing to say, right? When you don't have any evidence in your defense at a trial, right, you can't produce any, that's sort of evidence that maybe you are guilty, because it really should be. Just because you should be able to say, well, yeah, I can prove where I was at 3 o'clock, and I can do this, and I can do, something. But when you have no evidence to defend your position, you should be at a higher standard of proof. No evidence isn't a great position to be arguing that it's undeniable that I'm innocent because clearly I've produced no evidence demonstrating it. I mean, that's just too silly. Here they are arguing for kinetic energy. They're sure it's real, and yet they haven't done any of these basic experiments to prove it. And they're not that complicated, frankly, and they're not that difficult to do, and yet they haven't done any of them. They can't show me any of them done. Where it took 4 times more gas to get a car to 60 miles an hour than it took to get it to 30 miles an hour. Simple argument. If that's what you're arguing, then why don't you prove it? I mean, it's pretty easy to prove. But anyway, so there won't be, again, there's just no counter argument to the real argument. It's just arguments about paraphrases and some vague notion of what you're a pseudoscientist, and you just say that kind of crap and then say somebody doesn't have a right to be pissed off and say, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm not anti-science, you jackass. I mean, fuck you. You're the one who doesn't give a shit about this idea of repeating experiments. This idea of you being unbiased as the conductor of the experiment, that everybody should just have a bias, like Eddington had a huge bias, Young had a huge bias. Oh, that all doesn't matter, when they're saying what you want them to say. Yeah, I mean, you're so obvious. It's so obvious the cheats you're committing. Your hypocrisy and your duplicity. It's disgusting. So anyway. Yeah, so that's enough of a rant. So I don't know what I'm going to do, just because there is no counter argument. There's nothing. People won't even link me to the physics they think is good physics, because I guess they know that I'll rip it an asshole, and there won't be anything accomplished through the process, because I'll just do what I have done over and over and over again, is show how the insanely bad flaws in the logic and the description of the actual history is so bad and so inaccurate, and they'll just watch me do that over. I'll do it again. Just point out again another hypocrite, another just a fucking liar to be talking about that Jung's analysis. Jung didn't even see the double pattern. He didn't see the envelope pattern. It wasn't part of his analysis. It didn't even exist. And here, and they're just taking that into the, here it is, 2020, 200 years later. It's quite obvious the pattern is more complex than that. I mean, it's so glaringly. What the hell happened to the damn frickin' image? I thought it was still there. What the hell? Come on, play the video.
I'm Richard Branson.
Oh, fuck you. See, this is this is what you're financing, Piro. You're not just financing like, oh, I'm monetizing. No, you're propagandizing for agenda whore jackasses like this fucktard. This person who, this is the whole Trump, I don't want to get into it, but all these people just living off of preposterous debt. Okay, they're not really rich. They're just they're too indebted to go bankrupt. Nobody can make them go bankrupt, because they know they won't get any fucking money back. They can't, they loan these idiots tons and tons and, zillions of dollars, and they can't get any of that money back if they make them go bankrupt, because they know they're last on the list. And so they just lose. And so they're manipulating the system in disgusting ways. I mean, this is another asshole, went bankrupt plenty of times, but never had to take any account for it himself. It's just, it's disgusting. So here, clearly, the pattern is so clearly more than this simple, oh, look, it's this little lump in the middle and a couple little lumps going that way. There, that's all it is. That's all the single slit is. I mean, it's so bad. And how can you defend any of that as a foundation to build on? And to say, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of other theory, that there's a bunch of entanglement going on, superposition, all kinds of bizarre and weird shit is happening, based on a theory that starts off with something completely provable as wrong. It doesn't happen that way. It's not true. Your premise is completely wrong. Well, anyway. So I don't know what I don't know what the next move is. I mean, I think I'll just perfect the videos I've made, all right? Just make them a little better. Just, the overview video I made, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago was pretty good. And then, I have to fix the two slit just to take out the two little mistakes. That the bars aren't the same size, and which slit distance is controlling the pattern, but the rest of it's the rest of it's solid, and there's nothing else to do, until somebody provides a rational counter argument. There's nothing else to do here, and they can't do it. I mean, even the trolls, I provide my email address. If they have some great evidence to provide, why don't you just send me the link to your great piece of evidence? Show me kinetic energy being collected somewhere. Show it. What's the big deal? It shouldn't be hard to do. But no, it won't happen. Because this isn't about getting to the truth. This isn't about having a fair trial. It's a fucking mockery. And Piro's just part of that part of that lie and the deception, and living off of that as a mechanism of winning arguments through propaganda. I'll just tell you a fake bullshit story. It's the most proven mathematics in the history of mankind. This is their most proven mathematics, where his math didn't get either one of those patterns right. So he spent the first half of that video, first 15 minutes, telling you a story about how it works, and not a piece of it was connected to this actual image. There was no correlation at all. His mathematics didn't predict the little bars, and it didn't predict the big envelope pattern. Neither one. Got neither one of them right. And yet it's the most proven mathematical theory in the history of mankind. Do you really believe that? They can't even honestly describe a two-slit experiment. You believe them when they say all the rest of their math adds up. You know, all this convoluted crap about their entanglements and all the rest of this shit, and it all comes out perfect. Yeah. They can't even do this perfect. Alright. So, enough of a video. It's all quite discouraging. But I shall endeavor to persevere. Because there's no other road to walk. So I'll just keep walking that one. Till the next time and such, and so forth and whatnot. This has been a DraftScience video presentation. Till the next time and such. Hey.